Corrupted, dangerous, ruthless, and sadistic, the Manson family, led by their charismatic and manipulative leader, Charles Manson, terrorized the city of Los Angeles in the late 1960s. Engaging in multiple brutal murders, the cult-like group caused widespread fear and left a lasting impact on society. This is the story of the Manson family's reign of terror and their eventual downfall. Welcome to Crime Site, where we'll discuss America's most horrifying cult story. Darkness descended in the summer of 1969 in the United States. While the world celebrated the landmark moon landing of Apollo 11 and basked in the peace and love of Woodstock, a sinister force was at play. The notorious cult leader, Charles Manson, and his band of misguided followers unleashed a barrage of terror and bloodshed, leaving actress Sharon Tate and at least 8 others brutally murdered. The summer of 1969 marked the end of an era, a time of disillusionment and the birth of a new kind of evil. Manson's cult was a dark reflection of a society that had lost its way, and his motivations were as irrational and chaotic as the crimes he committed. But what do you really know about the Manson family, how it came to be, and how it came to end? Before joining us in exploring the twisted world of Charles Manson and the Manson family, subscribe to Crime Site for exclusive access to insightful analysis and gripping stories. Charles Manson was born into an unstable world, with a teen mom and a biological father who abandoned them both before he was even born. Kathleen Maddox soon married William Manson, and young Charles took on his surname. Growing up in a household surrounded by violence, it's no surprise that Manson was committing petty crimes by the age of 13. He was eventually sent to the Indiana Boys' School, where he was subjected to both assault and abuse, leading him down a dark path of violence toward others. Despite a brief period of stability when he was released to his uncle and aunt in West Virginia, Manson's tumultuous decade from 1957 to 1967 was filled with a constant cycle of crime, prison sentences, and parole violations. He became a pimp, married a sex worker, and aimed for fame in Hollywood by studying religion for control and manipulation, as well as seeking advice from other criminals. Manson even had a fascination with the Beatles and aspired to be a singer-songwriter, constantly searching for insider connections in the film industry. Little did anyone know he was just setting the stage for one of the most heinous murder sprees in history. Fresh out of prison, Manson lands in San Francisco, the pulsing heart of the countercultural revolution. He finds himself surrounded by free-spirited hippies, rejecting societal norms and living in a utopia of love and peace. But Manson had other plans. With a sly smile and a silver tongue, he weaves his way into the hearts of these hippies, luring them into twisted and manipulative relationships. He starts with Mary Brunner, a young librarian who falls under his spell and helps him gather more followers. The 60s may have promised freedom and equality, but Manson saw it as an opportunity to prey on the vulnerability of young women. He targeted Diane Lake, a 14-year-old who had moved from Minnesota with her parents to partake in the countercultural lifestyle. She quickly became one of his many Manson girls, swept up in his twisted world of drugs, sex, and abuse. With a growing following, Manson set his sights on Hollywood stardom. He roamed the streets of California, preaching his gospel of surrender to young women at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco and Venice Beach in Los Angeles. With each new recruit, he inched closer to his ultimate goal of fame and infamy. The countercultural revolution may have offered hope to women like Diane Lake, but Manson used it as a shield to hide his true intentions. He preyed on the kindness of the hippie movement, exploiting the most vulnerable and twisting them to his will. And in the fall of 1967, he had a family, and he was ready to take on the world. You know, there were a bunch of individuals who were associated with Charles Manson and his notorious Manson family, but some of them played critical roles in the horrific crimes he committed. Take Charles Tex Watson, for example. He was born in Texas, and that's where he got his nickname from. But he's not just any ordinary guy. He was one of Manson's right-hand men, participating in the gruesome murders of Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, and Rosemary LaBianca. Can you imagine being a part of such heinous acts? And then there's Linda Kasabian, who was present at the crime scenes during the Tate and LaBianca murders. But she didn't actually commit any of the killings. She was granted immunity from prosecution after she testified for the prosecution as a witness. That must have been a tough decision for her. Another one of the infamous members was Lynette Squeaky Fromm, who wasn't involved in the killings, but still managed to make headlines for attempting to assassinate President Gerald Ford a few years after the 1969 murders. Thankfully, Ford survived the assassination attempt, but Fromm ended up serving time in prison. Patricia Krenwinkel, on the other hand, was definitely not a stranger to violence. She was one of the Manson family members who participated in the Tate House murders and knifed coffee heiress Abigail Folger dozens of times. She showed no remorse during her trial. Can you believe that? And then there's Susan Atkins, who was one of Manson's most trusted followers. She helped Bobby Beausoleil and Mary Brunner murder Gary Hinman, as well as multiple people at the Tate and LaBianca homes. That's some serious stuff. So Manson and his followers eventually made their way to Los Angeles with the hopes of working with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys and music producer Terry Melcher. But when Melcher refused to record Manson's songs, he became deeply infuriated. They set up camp at a Western movie set called Spawn Ranch in the nearby desert. It was there, while living at the ranch, that Manson became obsessed with the Beatles' self-titled 1968 album, also known as the White Album. He convinced his followers that the album contained cryptic messages about an impending race war, which he named Helter Skelter after one of the album's songs. He mixed his racist beliefs with his desire for revenge against Melcher, and the rest is history. It all started out as a commune, a place for people to come together and escape the world's troubles, but it quickly became a breeding ground for violence and murder. Susan Atkins and the others murdered Gary Hinman in July 1969. They brutally tortured him and wrote "Political Piggy" in his blood on the walls. Besides that, the other family members also killed Donald Shorty Shea. It's just so senseless. And then the worst of all, the incident at Cielo Drive in Los Angeles, where Sharon Tate and her friends were murdered. The fact that Sharon Tate was 8.5 months pregnant at the time just makes it all the more heart-wrenching. The murder of actress Sharon Tate and others was a turning point in the public's perception of the hippie counterculture. People were shocked and horrified by the brutality of the killings. The night after the Tate murders, Charles Tex Watson, Leslie Van Houten, and other members of the family broke into LaBianca home and killed Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. The scene they left behind was just blood-curdling, writing "Death to Pigs" and "Helter Skelter" in blood on the walls and fridge of the family room is just beyond comprehension. The Manson family's reign of terror came to a close in the fall of 1969. After months of investigations, detectives finally linked the family to the brutal murders at Cielo Drive and the LaBianca home. On October 12, 1969, Charles Manson and several of his followers were arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The trial of Manson and his family was one of the most highly publicized criminal trials in history. The world watched in horror as the evidence against them was presented and as they proclaimed their innocence in court. But the evidence was too strong, and in the end, Charles Manson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten were all sentenced to death for their role in the murders. The downfall of the Manson family was a devastating blow to the victims' families and to society as a whole. The evil that these individuals had perpetrated left a lasting impact on the world, serving as a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the hearts of even the most seemingly ordinary people. The tragedy of the Manson family will always be remembered as one of the most shocking and horrific events of the 20th century. What do you think about the horrific story of the Manson family? Let us know. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the video on the right of this screen.